And on the hill there at Hawksbill Creek was a little a cave, and the natives back then were very weren't educated. They were scared of that cave because they called it the crow's hole, because when a hurricane came, all the crows would go into this hole, and they said, "Don't go in there. I should go in there," but we had a flashlight. We went in there, and there was a few little bones in there. Nice little cave in the side of the hill. So when we came out, man, we were real famous because we'd been in the crow's hole. They'd been in the crow's hole. And then, so we left there, and one thing I couldn't understand, when we anchored, first came in their anchor, we were in about 8 feet of water, and the boat only drew 5'2", and yet I could hear the scraping from the bottom. And it wasn't the chain coming up the anchor chain. I couldn't figure what it was. But anyway, we sailed from there into Nassau, and going downwind, this little native boat with a loose-footed rig outsailed us, and I couldn't understand how a boat with that rig could outsail us, because we were a pretty good boat. And but we got into Nassau, and we started to dock, and we got a line caught under the boat, and Harry dove under the boat and found out that the worm shoe, which on a wooden boat used to be under the bottom of the shoe, was a steel bar, flat bar, and that would keep it from torpedo worms getting into the keel, because when you ran aground, it would. But the boat, what had happened, the lag bolts held it up. It had rusted off the head, and it was hanging down, and that's why we were drawing that water. That was a sound coming up from the coral, rubbing the coral when we were there, and that's why we were so slow in going over to the Bahamas, over to Nassau from the Grand Bahama Island. So we got that fixed there, and then we cruised around the island for 5 weeks. Went down as far as San Salvador. There were we saw one yacht outside of Nassau when we were there, and there was not too many boats cruising out there then. But in Nassau, Prince George Wharf was a little L-shaped dock. There was one small cruise ship, fairly good-sized cruise ship, could anchor off and come stern to the dock. And they would throw pennies overboard, and the natives would drive in, I think it was 28 foot of water, dive down to the bottom and get a penny back then. That's how rough things were in Nassau during the Depression. And so we sailed all around out there, and one island we stopped at, Cat Island, Bennett's Harbor. We pulled in, and that was the highest 350 feet high mountain, called a mountain down there, which is a hill, and they said you should come up to see the highest point in the Bahamas, and you can look out, see the ocean on one side, the sound on the other. So I said, well, that'd be fine. And I went to lock the boat up, and they said, well, why are you locking the boat up? And I said, well, I'm locking the boat. It says, what for? It says, there's no need to do that. It said, there's not another white man within 20 miles of here. And that made me, we don't trust people who are different from ourselves. And I found out right then that they didn't trust me either. But anyway, also at the little town there, was two brothers. one was a minister and one ran the bar. So I got to thinking, well, man, they got this place covered. One guy gets all the bad people's money, and the other guy gets all the good people's money. They got this thing cornered. But anyway, we had a real nice cruise out there and came back. So later I kept sailing, and because I'd been out to the Bahamas, I went out again in a 59-foot schooner Pinta. Had a nice cruise out there. Well, one day we left Nassau. It was on a Friday, and we left Nassau. We're going around to the end of Eleuthera, and there was a place there that was developed. It was very good. Can't think of the name of it, but what they did, they had come down and they said, to help the natives, we'll show them how to raise chickens, eggs, beef, and they'll ship this stuff to Nassau because everything was coming from the States. And it was a very good arrangement for the natives. And when we were sailing around, we had three newspapermen aboard, and they were going to make a story about this. And I can't even think of the name of that place, but it's very good out there. So on the way out, we were going along with a good southeast wind. The wind about course was nearly northeast out of Nassau. Well, we were barreling along and close to 10 knots. Everything set. This 50-foot schooner, 59-foot schooner. And all of a sudden, the owner, Austin Gilmore, climbed the foremast, where they had the gaff rig foremast with hoops on it, penny halyards. He went up, was up there, and told Piddler was the helm, said, head, bear off. Well, we didn't want to bear off too much because if we got down there, we were going to have to beat. So he didn't want to bear off too much. He said, bear off, bear off. Well, he meant to go like this because there was Great Egg Reef right ahead of us, and we didn't know it. We piled into that reef, stopped going about 10 knots. I said, oh, God. And how he held on, how Austin held on up there, I don't know. But right before that, I think Piddler was at the wheel, and I was in the cockpit, and it had two hatches. Companionway went down to the main salon, and this one went down to the engine room. So just before we hit, I heard they had a rod reel trolling. I heard something on it, so I went pulling it in, and I put a barracuda about so big over the transom. That's when we hit. And man, I went backwards and hit my back on the corner of this hatch to the engine room. Man, I stayed there paralyzed as this barracuda was flopping around in the cockpit. They got it out there, and Austin came down and said, what you would do? And I said, he owned the boat but didn't have too much experience. I said, the first thing I'd take down all the sails, which they did. I couldn't do a thing, couldn't even move. And I said, then start up that old Red Wing gasoline engine to see if he could back off. And sure enough, backed off. And what had happened, we had run into the reef, and it had cut the dead with the keel, come down like that, and it cut the dead wood back about 18 inches through that much pine, and till it hit a bolt, and it stopped there, and that piece was hanging over the side, and it backed off, wasn't taking in on any amount of water now. But when we tacked around that point of Eleuthera, boy, we stayed out. The navigator said, well, we've got a 10 degrees for maybe a current, and 10 degrees for maybe the, and it took it to get around to the other side where we wanted to go to Dunmore Town. It took us all day. It took us at noon the next day to get there, and if we'd have gone in close, we could have made it so much closer, quicker. But at the time there, they were making a movie Bahama Passage with Madeline Carroll and Sterling Hayden. And Sterling Hayden, was a sailor, and he wanted to charter this schooner while he was making the movie. But Austin had this thing planned. So he had, so we went in and saw him making the movie, had a picture with him and all, and I saw the movie later on. It was fun, and I was impressed by a sign on a regular store there, Higgs and Ames, goats and coconuts, was a store. But anyway, so we came back, and I went one more time to the Bahamas with them, and then the war came along, so I was fortunate to go in as a warrant officer and crash boat outfit, running air sea rescue boats, kind of like PT boats without all the big armament. And so came back and started racing different boats, started racing Moth class with Charlie Morgan, Charlie Hunt, and then fish boats started racing Lightnings. I won the Lightning District Championship and went up to the internationals in Canada. And while there, Clint Johnson, sailmaker, said, "Harold, I want you to work for me and promote my sails." So I said, "Good." So I was going up there. I said, "Clint, make me a set of," this was more synthetics were any good, Egyptian cotton mainsail for no wind up to about 6 knots, real baggy mainsail and jib. So he did that. I went up there and we had light air. And I used that sail. I went out, went the wrong way. I thought it would be in close to land, better land wind offshore. And so while the race was going on, coming near the end of the race, I could hear it real calm, and when it's calm, you could hear voices go over the water. And on the committee boat, they said, "I thought that boat from Florida was supposed to be pretty good. It was back in the middle of the fleet." And I said, "Well, yeah, look at that sail he's got. No wonder he's way back there." So the next day we go out, and I took the wind got the right shift, led all the way around. So coming into the finish, and here they said, "Well, look at that boat, good. But no wonder it's going so good. Look at that sail he's got." The same sail. But it just depends upon a lot of luck, which way you go. Anyway, so I kept racing on bigger boats, and then I was running the boatyard, and I got a chance to go as captain on a boat, man I didn't know, and Charlie Morgan was building the boat. So I went over and saw the boat, it looked good, and they said, found out the man was Jack Eckert, so I went to see him about captain on the boat, and he hired me in. So I stayed on that boat for, I guess, about 10 years, all the time he had it. And it was, we had a lot of fun. We run the Nassau Cup, we won the Lipton Trophy off Miami Beach, and the FRA, Florida Ocean Race Association Championship one year. So it was, but the secret is to have a pretty good boat and get a good crew. And then the crew, we had anywhere from 8 to 12 people on the boat. And fortunately, I knew a lot of guys that knew how to sail well, and that was one reason that the boat did so well. Let's cut a while and see what.
Okay.
This is 1938 down in the Keys. I was sailing down there and come over here